The morning air was thick with mist, curling like ghosts over the edges of the lawn, just the way I liked it. I sat by the kitchen window with my usual cup of strong black coffee, the only sound coming from the ticking clock and the creak of my bones each time I moved. At 78, that was the music of my mornings, quiet, slow, predictable. The kind of life I'd settled into ever since Elaine passed 3 years ago. Our old farmhouse sat on the outskirts of a small New England town, perched high enough to catch the wind, and far enough from neighbors to keep the world out. I was making toast and reading yesterday's newspaper. Some habits die hard when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. I glanced out and frowned. A black SUV was pulling into my driveway. It wasn't familiar. I stood slowly, knees protesting, and limped to the front door. When it opened, my son Andrew stepped out, followed by his wife Carla, and behind them their two kids, Liam, 17 and sulking, and Kayla, a bubbly 12-year-old glued to a tablet. "Dad," Andrew called out with a bright smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Thought we'd surprise you." I stared at them, confused. "What are you doing here?" Carla moved ahead, already opening the trunk. "The kids have a school break and our place is being fumigated. Long story. We figured, why not come stay here for a few weeks?" "Weeks," I echoed. "Just until things settle," Andrew said quickly, brushing past me like he still lived here. "You've got plenty of room." And just like that, without another word, bags were being dragged inside. Kayla kicked off her boots on the hallway rug Elaine had picked out. Liam muttered something about no signal, and Carla opened windows to air the place out. I stood there on the porch, my hand still resting on the doorframe, watching my quiet morning evaporate into chaos. I hadn't said yes. I hadn't said anything, really. And yet they were inside, already making themselves at home. By lunchtime, Carla was in the kitchen, inspecting my fridge like a health inspector. "Dad, this milk expired yesterday," she said, wrinkling her nose. "And you eat this sausage. It's like 90% sodium." I said nothing, just sat at the table and sipped my now cold coffee. I'd bought that sausage the day before. I'd eaten it for years. "Don't worry, I brought some things with us," Carla added, unloading almond milk, gluten-free bread, and kale from a cooler. Andrew walked in, phone pressed to his ear. "Dad, we'll take the master bedroom. Easier for us with the kids and all. You can use the guest room downstairs, right?" I blinked. "The master, that's my room, Elaine's room." Andrew paused, but only for a second. "It's just a bed, Dad, and you won't have to climb the stairs this way." It was like being politely erased, piece by piece. The guest room downstairs hadn't been touched in years. A narrow twin bed, a dusty lamp, and wallpaper Elaine once called temporary. I sat on the mattress that evening, looking at my suitcase on the floor, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like a guest in my own home. Dinner was quinoa, grilled vegetables, and some chickpea thing Carla was proud of. I nodded through the conversation, though nobody was really talking to me. Andrew discussed his firm's merger, Carla rattled off Kayla's swim achievements, and Liam stayed buried in his phone. "We were thinking," Carla said suddenly, "maybe repainting the kitchen. That green is, well, it's very 90s. Elaine picked that green. Spent weeks debating between sage and seafoam." "I like it the way it is," I said quietly. "Oh, of course," Carla said with a smile that didn't match her tone. "Just a suggestion, but freshening things up could really increase the home's value, you know." That made me look up. Why would I care about that? Andrew chuckled awkwardly. "Just in case, it's always good to have options." Options for them. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I wandered into the kitchen. It still smelled faintly like garlic and kale. I opened the fridge and found all my groceries gone, replaced by imported yogurt and oat milk. I closed the door quietly, leaned against the counter, and sighed. I pulled Elaine's photo from my wallet. She was smiling in it, caught mid-laugh in the garden out back. "What's happening, Elaine?" I whispered, Did I miss something? The following days passed like slow-moving fog, quiet but invasive. Carla's presence began to bleed into every room of the house. Little by little she rearranged things, always under the guise of helping out. She replaced the cozy knitted blankets Elaine had made with sleek gray throws. My collection of old cookbooks, filled with handwritten notes and recipes in Elaine's looping script, were boxed and labeled clutter. My radio disappeared from the kitchen counter, replaced by a smart speaker that answered to Carla's voice. "Hey Echo, play something relaxing," she said one morning, and the device responded with some breathy singer murmuring over soft guitar. Elaine used to listen to big band jazz while she cooked. That speaker couldn't hold a candle to Sinatra. Even the living room wasn't safe. The family photos were taken down to make space, she said, replaced by abstract art prints that looked like paint accidents. My leather recliner, the one with my imprint sunk into the seat, was suddenly too worn down and moved to the garage. "You shouldn't be sitting in that anyway," Carla said. "It's terrible for your posture." "You know what else is terrible for my posture?" I muttered, being pushed out of my own life. Andrew, as usual, said little. When I confronted him, he gave me that same weary look I'd grown used to, like I was the one being difficult. "Dad, Carla's just trying to help. She's making things more comfortable for everyone." Everyone but me. It got worse when I walked into the garage and found boxes labeled Dad's storage. Inside, Elaine's garden tools, her handwritten journals, even our wedding album. The box wasn't sealed, just half shut like they expected I wouldn't notice. That night I couldn't sleep. The ceiling fan in the guest room made a low mechanical groan, and the mattress had a tilt to it, like it had given up long before I got there. I stared at the ceiling and listened to the faint laughter upstairs, where my room, my real room, had become someone else's. The next morning I walked into the kitchen at 6:30, same as always, but the table was already set. "We've changed breakfast to 8, Carla said, breezing past in gym clothes. "We're doing family mornings now, and we've switched to decaf." I stared at the herbal tea bag she'd placed beside my mug like it was an insult, because it was. "Caffeine's bad for the heart," she added, like I hadn't lived 78 years with a full pot of black coffee every morning. I went back to the garage and brewed a cup with my old camping percolator. They even took my mornings from me. Liam and Kayla barely acknowledged me. I tried making conversation at dinner, asked Liam about school, Kayla about her tablet games. Liam grunted something I couldn't hear, and Kayla didn't even look up. "They're just going through a phase," Andrew said when I pointed it out. "No," I said, "they're just not taught any better." That didn't go over well. One evening I sat down to watch an old Western movie I used to love, something with John Wayne. I'd waited all day for that little pleasure. Halfway through, Carla walked in and wrinkled her nose. "This is really loud and kind of aggressive," she said, taking the remote. "Let's switch to something lighter." Next thing I knew, we were watching a reality dating show where people screamed at each other in swimwear. I was watching that, I said, more to myself than to her. Carla shrugged. "Let's be honest, Dad. You've seen that cowboy movie 100 times. And I'd like to see it 100 more, I snapped. She blinked at me like I'd spoken another language. The next day, I came back from a walk to find my record player gone. I'd kept it in the corner of the living room, my one space. A pile of records I'd collected since my 20s were missing too. "Where are my records?" I asked. "Oh, I boxed those up," Carla replied, not even looking up from her phone. "They were gathering dust and Kayla's allergic. I put them in the garage." I didn't say a word. Just walked out, went to the garage and found the box shoved into a corner. A few sleeves were bent. My Miles Davis originals crumpled. Ella Fitzgerald pressed against a broken fan. I took the box into my tiny room and slid it under the bed. That night I cried, quietly, for Elaine, for the home I was losing, for the man I was becoming, small, faded, erased. In the days that followed, Carla rearranged my bookshelves to make space for her decorative jars. She threw out my bath mat, mold risk, she said, and replaced it with a bamboo board that nearly made me slip. The shower pressure changed because Andrew had installed a water-saving head. Even my soap was replaced. Every single change came with a smile, a justification, we thought it'd be better. Better for who? One evening I heard laughter in the living room. Real, loud laughter. Curious, I stepped out and peeked around the corner. The four of them, Andrew, Carla, Liam, Kayla, were playing some game, shouting answers and giggling. For a brief moment, it looked like a real family, something I hadn't seen in a while. Then Kayla asked, "Was this Grandpa's house?" Carla laughed. "It still is, technically." I stepped back before they saw me. Technically. That word echoed in my head all night. I don't remember exactly when it shifted from feeling like a visit to feeling like an occupation. But once it did, the weight of it was suffocating. Each day brought a new erosion. My office upstairs, where I used to sort through old letters, pay bills, and listen to records, was now Liam's gaming den. Posters of some heavy metal band plastered over the wallpaper Elaine and I had hand-painted 30 years ago. The desk was gone. In its place sat a giant monitor and a tower lit up with neon fans. I stood in the doorway once, watching Liam bark orders into a headset, clicking furiously at buttons like he was defusing a bomb. He looked up and snapped, "Can you not just stand there?" I didn't answer. I just turned around and went back to my corner of the house. A few days later, I opened the hallway closet to look for an old photo album. Empty. I found the albums in the backyard, on top of a trash bin. The covers were warped from dampness. One had burst open and old pictures were spilling out. Elaine on our wedding day, Andrew as a toddler with ice cream all over his cheeks, our first Christmas in this house. "What the hell is this?" I barked, voice shaking more than I'd expected. Carla came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Oh, those. We needed the closet space. I figured we'd scan them later." "You figured," I repeated, pulling the albums out and cradling them like wounded animals. "These aren't junk. They are my memories." "In boxes," she shrugged. "They're safer stored digitally." "They're safer with me." That was the first time I slammed a door in this house. Later that night, Andrew came to talk. He sat on the edge of the bed in my shoebox-sized room, speaking softly, like I was a skittish cat. "Dad, we didn't mean to upset you. It's just the house is a lot to manage. You live alone, things get cluttered." "It's my clutter," I said. "We're helping, that's all." But that's not what it felt like. It felt like they were replacing me, one object at a time. I was becoming a footnote in my own story. I kept everything now in my small room. Photo albums, record box, Elaine's vase, even the newspaper clippings from when I made district supervisor at the post office. My room became a museum of what used to be, sealed away from the version of the house they were curating without me. Then came the worst blow. It was a Sunday morning. I was in the garage looking for a screwdriver when I found a pile of mail on the workbench, letters addressed to Andrew and Carla from real estate agencies. Curious, I flipped through. One envelope was open. Inside was a printed quote for a full renovation, kitchen, upstairs bath, siding. Attached was a form titled, "Home Value Optimization Before Listing." Listing. I took the paper inside and laid it on the table in front of Andrew. "What is this?" I asked. He looked up from his laptop, startled. Carla froze at the sink. "It's just exploratory," Andrew said. "Just seeing what the house could be worth." I stared at him. "Are you planning to sell?" "No," he said quickly. "Of course not." But his eyes said something different, and Carla's silence said even more. You're not even on the deed, I reminded him. Not yet, he mumbled. Excuse me. Andrew ran a hand through his hair. You said once, after Mom passed, you'd sign it over eventually. You didn't want the hassle. You said that, remember? I didn't remember, or maybe I had said it in passing. When grief fogs the brain, words come easy. But promises, those are earned, not assumed. I never signed anything, I said. I know, he said, backing down. It's not a big deal. It was, and now I knew this wasn't just a visit. This was a quiet coup. 2 nights later, while Carla was out and the kids were upstairs, Andrew knocked on my door. For once he looked tired, not annoyed, not detached, just tired. Dad, there's something we need to discuss. I braced myself. Carla's parents are thinking of moving in with us. I stared at him. Here. Just for a while. They're selling their house in Florida until they find something new. There's no room. Andrew hesitated. Actually, we were thinking, maybe it's time you considered a retirement place. The words floated in the air like a bad smell. I waited for the punchline. It didn't come. You're serious? It's not a punishment, he said. It's just, this house is big, it's a lot for you, and Pinecrest Lodge is really nice. They've got activities, a library, meals included. He said it like it was a cruise. I stood slowly. You're trying to push me out so Carla's parents can take over. No, he insisted, of course not. But I could see it. I could see it plain as day. They weren't just pushing me into the corner of the house. They were pushing me out of the house entirely. Get out of my room, I said, my voice low and clear. Dad. Out. He left without another word. That night, I lay in bed clutching one of Elaine's old scarves, listening to the laughter echoing from the upstairs hallway, the part of the house I no longer had access to. I turned to the photo of her on the nightstand. I'm sorry, I whispered. I didn't protect what we built. I didn't sleep at all that night. Something inside me had shifted. A line had been crossed, and not just by them but by me too. I had let it happen. I had watched them take my home, my memories, my peace, and I had backed down 1 inch at a time, always telling myself it wasn't worth the fight, that they meant well, that it was temporary. But now the lie was laid bare. They didn't see me as a man anymore. I was an obstacle, an outdated fixture in the house they already considered theirs. The next morning was quiet, too quiet. I skipped breakfast and stayed in my room. I wasn't hungry. I wasn't anything, really. Just hollow. Around noon there was a knock. I expected it to be Andrew, maybe coming to smooth things over again. But it was Kayla. Grandpa, she said, peeking in, can I come in? I was surprised. She hadn't really looked at me since they arrived, always glued to her tablet or earbuds. Of course. She stepped in, hesitated, then sat on the edge of the bed. Her eyes flicked over the room, photos, records, keepsakes piled like artifacts of a forgotten world. I heard Mom and Dad talking last night. That got my full attention. They said they're sending you away, to some home. She looked down, fidgeting with the hem of her shirt, and they're giving your room to Grandma Prudence and Grandpa Bill. My chest tightened. I already knew, but hearing it from her lips made it feel colder. When? I asked. Soon. I think they already paid a deposit. Of course they had. They said it'll be easier for everyone, that you'd be happier. I almost laughed. Happier. They said you don't really do anything anymore, that you don't need the whole house. She looked ashamed just repeating it. I leaned forward, speaking quietly. Thank you for telling me, Kayla. That means a lot. She nodded. I don't want you to go. I placed a hand on her shoulder. Neither do I. That night at dinner, the tension was thick. Carla was smiling too brightly. Andrew avoided my eyes, and the kids were quiet. Even Liam, who usually had no issue making noise just by existing, kept his head down. Then Andrew cleared his throat. "We wanted to talk about something," he said. I waited. Carla jumped in. "It's about your well-being, Dad. We just want what's best for you." I looked up. "Is that why you've picked out a home and paid a deposit without telling me?" The air went still. Carla blinked. Andrew looked caught off guard. "How did you? You think I'm senile, but I'm not deaf." Andrew sighed. "Look, we didn't want to spring it on you, but you can't keep living like this, alone with all this space." "I wasn't alone," I said, voice low. "Not until you moved in and made me invisible." Carla crossed her arms. "We're just being practical. Pinecrest is a good facility. It's safe, clean." "It's not home." Andrew leaned forward. "We've made a decision. You'll move in by the end of the week." "And if I say no?" He exchanged a glance with Carla. "We've spoken to a lawyer," he admitted. "If we can get 2 doctors to agree that you're unable to live independently, you'll take legal control of my life." Neither of them answered. I stood, every bone in my body protesting, but my voice didn't waver. "You don't get to make that decision, not yet." Andrew's jaw tightened. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." "I'm not the one making it hard," I said. "You are, you and your wife. You took my house, my room, my past, and now you want my future." Silence. I left the table, went to my room and locked the door. Not because I thought they'd barge in, but because it was the last thing I had power over. That night I sat on the floor with a pen and notepad. I didn't know what the plan was yet, but I knew I needed one. They were ready to bury me while I was still breathing. They wanted me gone. Let's see how they'd handle it when I flipped the script. I didn't have a roadmap, only resolve. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I opened the small fireproof box I kept in my closet. Inside were documents I hadn't touched in years. Insurance, my old will, Elaine's death certificate, and the deed to the house. My name, clear as day, typed in bold letters, Harold James Emerson. They could decorate, rearrange, and even talk to lawyers. But legally, the house was still mine. That was my foothold. The next morning, I made a call. Ferris Lyle was the only old friend I still had left in town. We worked together for 30 years at the Postal Service, retired the same year. He'd lost his wife too, moved in with his daughter. We hadn't spoken in a while, but I knew he'd pick up. He did. "Harold, well, I'll be damned, you still alive?" "Barely." I explained everything, from the uninvited arrival to the now inevitable eviction. He whistled low when I was done. "That's cold, Harold, damn cold." "I want to fight back, I just don't know how." There was a pause, then he said, "You still own the place." "Free and clear." "Then here's what you do, sell it." I laughed dry and bitter. "Sell it and live where, Ferris? In a tent? There are buyers out there who'd pay big for a property like yours, especially near the lake. You might even find someone who will let you stay on it if the deal's right." "That sounds like a fantasy." "Sounds like freedom." He gave me the number of his nephew, Mason, a real estate broker who specialized in quiet listings for high-value properties. Discreet guy. He's helped a lot of retirees move into better situations. I thought it over all day. That night, after another cold dinner of quinoa and silent stares, I made my choice. The next morning, I called Mason. He agreed to meet the next afternoon at the public library to keep things quiet. I told Andrew I was going for a walk. Carla didn't even look up from her tablet. Mason was younger than I expected. Sharp suit, sharper smile, but there was something honest in the way he listened. He didn't interrupt, didn't judge. After I laid it all out, he said, "If your name's on the title and there are no encumbrances, you can sell it tomorrow if you want. No one can stop you." "They'll try." "Then let's stay ahead of them." We got to work. He listed the property privately, reaching out to a select few buyers looking for lakefront homes. The kind who didn't blink at six-figure prices. The kind who'd jump at the chance if it meant keeping it off the market. By the end of the week, he had 3 serious inquiries. I spent my days pretending everything was normal, pretending to nap in my room while Mason showed buyers around during open windows, the 2-hour slots when Carla took the kids to activities and Andrew worked from his office downtown. One buyer was an older couple from Boston, no interest in having me stay on the land. Pass. Another was a tech guy who wanted to tear it all down and build something smart. Pass. Then came Naomi. She was in her mid-60s, widow, former art professor, wanted a quiet place near the water to paint, garden, and start a new chapter. When Mason floated the idea of a small guest house for the current owner, she didn't flinch. "I think that's beautiful," she said. "Everyone deserves to end where they began." That was the one. We signed preliminary papers under a confidentiality agreement. The offer was more than I expected, and she even agreed to fund the construction of a 1-bedroom cottage at the edge of the property, complete with a ramp entrance, private bath, and views of the lake. I wouldn't be just selling my house, I'd be trading it for peace. We planned the final closing for the following Monday, and I planned my exit. The next Sunday morning, Andrew knocked on my door. "Dad, tomorrow's the move," Pinecrest called. "They've prepared everything, we'll come with you, help settle you in." I smiled. "Thank you, son, I appreciate that." He blinked, surprised I wasn't fighting back. I wasn't, because I'd already won. Monday morning arrived with the kind of stillness that always seems to hang before a storm. I woke early, earlier than usual, and packed a single suitcase. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted them to see me comply, to play my part just a bit longer. At 9:00 a.m., Andrew pulled into the driveway looking smug. Carla trailed behind, double-checking a printed itinerary for Pinecrest Lodge, like she was sending me on a cruise instead of into exile. "You have everything?" Andrew asked, peering into the modest suitcase beside me. "I've lived on less," I said with a polite nod. Carla pursed her lips. "The nurse will meet us at the check-in desk, and there's a welcome lunch. I'm sure it'll be delightful." I didn't say a word during the ride. Just watched the familiar streets pass by like ghosts, the bakery where Elaine and I used to buy lemon scones, the park bench where we once kissed like teenagers after a town festival, the post office I spent 35 years sorting mail in, one letter at a time. All of it fading. At Pinecrest I nodded through introductions, smiled politely, let them walk me to my assigned room, a sterile little box with beige walls, hospital lighting, and a twin bed dressed in scratchy sheets. "This is temporary," Carla chirped. "Once Mom and Dad are settled in, we'll revisit everything." They left 20 minutes later, smiling like heroes. I locked the door behind them and exhaled. An hour later, Mason arrived. We met in the small garden out back, a patch of dying hedges and metal benches too hot in the sun. He handed me an envelope, the signed documents, the buyer's agreement, and a check for the deposit. "It's done," he said. "Naomi's officially the owner as of 10:00 a.m. And the guest house? She's already speaking with contractors. You'll move in after it's done, maybe 3 months. And in the meantime, I've arranged for you to stay at a quiet rental apartment in town, furnished, by the lake." I smiled. "Let me guess, plenty of coffee, no kale." He laughed. "Exactly." The next morning, I left Pinecrest without fanfare. No one noticed. No one cared. I was just one old man among many, just another quiet shadow slipping away. Mason drove me to the apartment. It wasn't big, but it was mine. It had a kitchenette, a leather recliner, and a window view of the lake. The first thing I did was brew a cup of real coffee and stand barefoot on the balcony. Freedom smells like fresh air and bitter roast. That Saturday, Naomi called. "I'm visiting the house today for a final walkthrough," she said. "Would you like to join?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. We agreed to meet at 2:00 p.m. The same hour Andrew and Carla were throwing a welcome home party for her parents. The irony was too good. Naomi picked me up in her little red hatchback. She wore a sun hat and floral blouse and smelled faintly of lavender. "You nervous?" she asked. "Not really." I was. When we pulled into the driveway, there were balloons on the mailbox and extra cars parked on the grass. Through the front window, I could see people milling about inside, smiling, drinking, laughing. They had no idea. Naomi and I walked up to the door. I rang the bell. Andrew answered, half distracted, holding a tray of drinks. Then he saw me, and everything stopped. "Dad," he asked, voice tight, "what are you?" "Hello, Andrew." He looked past me at Naomi. "This is Naomi Wells," I said, "the new owner of this house." Silence. "Excuse me." Naomi stepped forward, extending a hand. "It's a pleasure. I believe we have 30 days for you to vacate." Andrew blinked, his mouth open then closed. Behind him, Carla appeared, followed by her parents, Prudence and William. 4 faces suddenly drained of all color. "I own this house," Andrew finally stammered. "This is some kind of mistake." "No," Naomi replied evenly. "The deed was transferred legally. Your father retained all his rights. It's not your house, never was. But he's in a facility. He can't." "He can," I said, and I did. Guests behind them began to whisper. Carla stepped forward. "You can't do this. My parents sold their home to move here." "I was moved out against my will," I said calmly. "I lived in that nursing home while you gutted this place and filled it with strangers." "We had no choice," she hissed. "No, you made a choice. You just didn't expect I'd make one too." Andrew looked ready to explode. "You don't have the authority." "Then sue me," I replied, "but you'll lose." Naomi handed him a copy of the legal documents. Carla read the front page. I saw her knees wobble. "This can't be happening," she whispered. "It already has," I said. More silence. Then Naomi smiled brightly. "Now, if you'll excuse us, we have some paint colors to discuss." I turned to leave. Behind me, I heard Prudence wail, "Where the hell are we supposed to go?" And Carla mutter, "Oh my God's the party." Naomi and I walked down the steps. Halfway to the car, I looked back one last time. Andrew stood in the doorway, white as a sheet, holding the deed like it was a death certificate. That's when it hit me, not revenge, not joy. Just peace. A quiet, satisfying peace. After the confrontation, I felt a strange calm settle over me, like the eye of a storm. The house, once a prison, was now a place of possibility. But the hardest part was still ahead, building my new life. Naomi was more than just the buyer. She became my unexpected ally. When she visited the house to plan the guest house, she listened to my stories about Elaine, the garden, the late nights by the fireplace, and treated my memories with respect. "I want this place to honor your life here," she said one afternoon, tracing her finger along the faded windowsill. "Not erase it." Her kindness was balm to a weary soul. The guest house plans were impressive. A cozy 1-bedroom with a small porch overlooking the lake, a ramp for easy access, and even a little art nook. She hired an architect who made sure every detail was perfect for my needs. One afternoon, Mason drove me to meet the contractor. The building site was a quiet corner of the property where the wildflowers still grew. I stood there, feeling a flicker of hope. "Soon," Mason said, clapping me on the back, "you'll have your own place again." And I believed him. As the weeks passed, Naomi visited often. She brought homemade meals, listened patiently when I talked about the past, and even introduced me to her dog, a scruffy terrier named Max. I began to realize that the house wasn't just bricks and timber, it was people. Memories lived in stories, in laughter, in the sharing of life. Meanwhile, Andrew and Carla struggled. The news of the sale spread quickly through our circle of friends and neighbors. Some expressed sympathy for me, others whispered about the scandal. At family gatherings, Andrew's anger simmered beneath polite words. He tried to call me, text me, even stopped by my apartment unannounced. I kept my distance, guarded but not cold. One day, Naomi surprised me by inviting Elena, my granddaughter, to visit the construction site. She was hesitant at first, but soon warmed to the idea of spending time outdoors. Elena and I started walking together on weekends, sharing stories and rebuilding the bridge that had long been broken. "It's different now," she said once, watching the sun set over the lake, "but maybe better." Her words were a promise. By the time the guest house was complete, I felt reborn. It wasn't the grand mansion Elaine and I had once dreamed of, but it was mine. A sanctuary where I could live on my terms, surrounded by nature and memories. Naomi handed me the keys with a smile. "Welcome home, Harold." And for the first time in years, I truly believed it. The day of the confrontation arrived faster than I'd expected. Naomi had arranged a gathering at the old house, an open house of sorts, but with a secret mission. She invited a small crowd of neighbors and friends, including Andrew and Carla, without telling them the full story. I arrived early, dressed in my best jacket, feeling the familiar knot of nerves twist in my stomach. This was more than a legal battle, it was a reckoning. Guests began arriving. Chatter filled the rooms, glasses clinked, and the smell of fresh flowers mingled with the scent of old wood. Andrew and Carla came last, their faces masks of forced calm. I watched them from across the room, their eyes flicking nervously to me. Then Naomi stepped forward. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice steady and warm. "I want to introduce you to someone very special, Harold Emerson, the rightful owner of this home." A hush fell. I stepped up beside her. "This house belongs to me," I said, my voice firm but calm. "For years I lived here with my late wife, Elaine. Then my son and daughter-in-law moved in uninvited and began pushing me out. Today, thanks to the kindness of Naomi and the law, I've reclaimed it." Andrew's jaw tightened. Carla's eyes darted around, searching for support. Naomi continued, "This isn't just about property. It's about respect, dignity, and the right to choose where and how we live, no matter our age." The room filled with murmurs of agreement. I saw neighbors nodding, some offering sympathetic smiles. Andrew finally spoke, voice low, "Dad, this isn't over." "No," I said. "It's just beginning, but this time I'm in control." I looked around at the familiar faces, the people who had watched our family grow and crumble, and felt a surge of strength. This house was my home, my memories, my future. And no one was taking that away again. After reclaiming my home, life took on a new rhythm, one I hadn't felt in years. The guest house became my sanctuary. Mornings started with quiet coffee on the porch, watching the sun rise over the lake. I planted flowers in the small garden Naomi helped me design, each bloom a small victory. Elena visited regularly. We'd sit on the porch steps, talking about her college classes, her hopes, and the world beyond our little town. For the first time, I felt connected to my family again, not through shared space but through shared moments. Naomi stopped by with homemade meals and stories about her travels, inspiring me to dream beyond these walls. With Mason's help, I managed my finances wisely. The proceeds from the house sale gave me a comfort I'd never imagined, enough to travel, to take up photography classes, and even indulge in the occasional fancy dinner. The bitterness of the past still lingered, but it no longer defined me. Occasionally, Andrew called or sent messages, sometimes pleading, sometimes angry. I kept my responses brief but firm. This was my life now. Independence regained. Dignity restored. One afternoon, I sat by the lake with Max, Naomi's terrier, watching the gentle waves ripple under the summer sun. The past was a shadow behind me. The future stretched wide and bright ahead. At 78, I was not just surviving, I was living. The months that followed were the quietest, and yet the richest of my life. The guest house, with its soft wooden floors and windows that caught the morning light just right, became my refuge. I filled it with small comforts, a worn armchair where I could read, a shelf for my beloved records, a small canvas and paints where I'd started to dabble again. Elaine would have liked that. Elena's visits grew more frequent, her laughter filling the space that once felt so hollow. We talked about everything, her studies, my youth, the house by the lake, and the dreams I still held close. Andrew and Carla faded into the background. Their calls became less urgent, their visits fewer. Perhaps time would teach them what I already knew, that control is a fragile thing and respect cannot be demanded, it must be earned. One afternoon, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and pink, I stood on the porch of my guest house, looking out over the water. The air was still, save for the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant call of a loon. It was peaceful, truly peaceful. I thought back to the day they arrived unannounced, suitcases in tow, ready to take over my life. I thought of the pain, the loss, the humiliation, but I also thought of the fight, my fight, and the unexpected allies who helped me reclaim what was mine. I smiled, feeling the weight of years lift from my shoulders. 78 years, and I was just getting started. Because home isn't just where you live, it's where you belong, where your story continues. And mine was far from over. It's a strange thing, starting life over when the world expects you to wind down. After the house was sold and the dust of confrontation settled, I found myself waking up with a sense of possibility rather than dread. There were no passive-aggressive comments over breakfast, no silent glares across the living room, no one reprogramming the thermostat because I liked it a little warmer than eco-efficient. The quiet now wasn't empty, it was earned. I started going for morning walks again, slow ones but steady. My joints protested at first, but I ignored them. Every step felt like defiance against everything I'd been made to believe, that I was too old, too much trouble in the way. Some mornings I'd walk past the main house, now Naomi's house, and she'd wave from her garden, wide-brimmed hat on, hands covered in soil. We'd talk about the tomatoes or the deer that kept nibbling the tulips, or the little repairs she was always dreaming up. Sometimes we just stood in silence, two people who'd both lost something and found something. I created rituals. Coffee at sunrise. A warm blanket on the porch chair by 7:00. Jazz or classical records mid-morning, depending on the mood. A journal where I wrote down every thought I used to keep inside because nobody listened. Now I wrote for me, sometimes pages, sometimes a sentence. I am still here. One day Naomi invited me to an art class she was teaching at the local senior center. I laughed at first. Me, paint. Naomi, I haven't drawn since I got in trouble for doodling during Sunday school. That's the best reason to try again, she said with a smile. You're free now. That word stuck with me, free. About 2 months after moving in, a letter arrived. Handwritten, addressed simply, Dad. I stared at it for a while before opening it. Andrew's handwriting, sharp, neat, too careful. Dad, I know things didn't go the way we planned. I was angry at first, but I've had time to think. Carla and we were wrong. We acted entitled. We forgot that you're not just dad, you're a man who built a life, a home, and gave everything to a family that didn't appreciate it the way we should have. I miss talking to you, and I hate that Kayla feels like she's caught in the middle. If you're willing, maybe we could have dinner, just us. I'd like to listen this time. Andrew. I reread it twice, unsure what I felt. It wasn't an apology, not exactly. But it was a start. We met at a small Italian place in town. He arrived before me, a good sign, nervous smile, no Carla in sight. He stood when I walked in. Dad, he said. Andrew. There was a long pause. Then we both laughed, awkward and genuine at once. Dinner was not easy, but honest. He told me about the pressure he'd felt to manage everything after Mom died. How Carla's ideas of structure and order had slowly become control. I let her bulldoze everything, he said, stabbing his fork into a meatball, including you. I let it happen too, I admitted. That's on me. But I should have remembered, you're not fragile, you're just older. That's not the same thing. No, I said, it's not. We ate, we talked. We avoided big words like forgiveness, but there was a gentler rhythm between us by dessert. He offered to help plant a tree at the guest house. A new beginning, he said. I didn't answer, but I didn't say no. Kayla started visiting again. She brought cookies she baked herself, too much sugar, not enough flour, but I praised them like they were gourmet. We sat under the maple tree behind the guest house, reading from the same book. She said I reminded her of Dumbledore, wise, but kind of mysterious. Are you going to write a book, Grandpa? She asked once. Maybe, I said, but it'd be full of the things no one ever wanted to hear. I'd read it. That moment cracked something open in me. Maybe I hadn't lost my family. Maybe I just needed to remind them that I was still worth hearing. One morning I woke up and realized I hadn't thought about the nursing home in weeks. It felt like a bad dream, like it had happened to someone else. The bitterness had drained out of me, replaced by routine, relationships, and this strange new joy of waking up knowing I had no one to please but myself. I planted a small memorial garden for Elaine by the lake. Just a bench, a plaque with her name, and a circle of yellow roses she used to love. Elena helped pick the spot. Sometimes I sat there alone. Sometimes Naomi joined me. Once even Andrew did. We didn't speak that time. Just sat, side by side, watching the wind move across the water. That was enough. Some days I still wake up expecting the old world, the one where my steps were softer, my voice quieter, and my presence in my own home felt like an intrusion. I lie there, waiting for the clatter of Carla's dishes in the kitchen or the drone of Liam's game echoing through the hallway. But it doesn't come. All I hear now is birdsong, the distant ripple of water brushing the lake's edge, and the ticking of the antique clock Naomi found for me at a flea market. I stretch, slowly, purposefully, not because I have anywhere to be, but because I can. Sometimes I'll wander into town and sit on the bench outside the bakery. The same bench Elaine and I once claimed as ours. The staff knows me now. They save me a corner scone and always ask if I want the real coffee, not the decaf stuff people assume old men drink. I always say yes. Once a teenager offered me his seat on the bus. I thanked him, then stood the whole ride anyway, just to prove a point. I've become something of a fixture at the community center. I don't talk much during the card games, but I listen, and people talk to me like I've always been there. Naomi's art class became a weekly routine. My hands are still clumsy with a brush, but there's something freeing about putting color on a blank page. I painted the lake once, not because it was beautiful, but because it was mine. My piece, my horizon. I mailed a print of it to Elena. She framed it and put it on her dorm room wall. I still haven't spoken to Carla. I see her name pop up on Andrew's phone when we sit together sometimes. He looks at the screen, hesitates, and pockets it. We don't talk about her. Not yet. maybe never. Some bridges don't need rebuilding, they just need space to sink and become quiet reminders of where not to go again. Andrew's been better. He visits now and helps around the guest house, though I insist I'm fine. He brought Liam once, awkward, taller than I remembered, but quieter. I offered him a soda and we sat watching a squirrel attempt to steal sunflower seeds from Naomi's garden. We didn't talk much, but when he left he said, "See you next time, Grandpa." I held on to that for days. Alina writes to me often, handwritten letters. She says it makes her feel connected, like she's keeping something alive. I told her she is. She once asked if I regretted what happened. I didn't answer right away. I sat with that question for a long time. Regret is a strange thing. It sneaks up at night, whispers at you when you're trying to fall asleep. I regret not speaking up sooner. I regret how quiet I let myself become. But I don't regret the day I decided to stop being erased. You can't rewrite the past, but you can stop letting it write your future. I kept Elaine's photo on my nightstand. Some days I talk to it out loud. Silly things. A bad joke I heard. A new bird I spotted near the feeders. The way Naomi laughs at her own painting mistakes. One night the stars were so clear I pulled my chair outside and just sat, looking up. I hadn't done that in decades. There was something humbling about it, knowing how vast everything is, and yet how much peace I found in this little pocket of earth I fought to keep. I don't feel old here, I feel alive. I thought I was being pushed toward the end, but really I was just being redirected, not toward a finish line but a different beginning. If someone told me a year ago that I'd find joy again, real, unfiltered, steady joy, I wouldn't have believed them. But here I am. Still standing. Still home. Alina brought a sketchpad with her the next time she visited. She'd started drawing in her free time, portraits mostly, sometimes landscapes. She asked if she could sketch me, and I said only if she promised not to make me look grumpier than I already am. She grinned and told me, too late. She sat across from me on the porch, pencil moving steadily, occasionally glancing up to catch the curve of my jaw, the slope of my shoulders. I didn't move. I didn't have to. It felt good being still for a reason other than fatigue. I watched the lake instead, the way it shimmered in the light, the soft rhythm of wind passing through pine. When she was done, she turned the pad around. It was rough, not polished, but it was me. Not the version people see in passing. The one who's lived. Eyes with weight. Lines with meaning. It was the kind of image no phone filter could replicate. It was honest. She tore the page out and handed it to me. I framed it that night. A few days later, I went into town to see a lawyer. Not because something was wrong, but because I wanted to update my will. I left the guest house and what I still owned to Alina. Not out of revenge, not to exclude Andrew or anyone else, but because she had listened when no one else did. She saw me before anyone tried to move me aside. She reminded me that legacy isn't money or property. It's memory, connection, the quiet love passed between generations like folded notes. I didn't tell her right away. Some gifts don't need ceremony. I took a trip that month, my first in years. Naomi insisted. She helped me book a train to the coast, and I spent 3 days walking unfamiliar streets, eating seafood fresh from the dock and watching strangers live their loud, messy lives. I felt invisible in the best way. No one knew who I was. No one expected anything. I could just be. I brought back a smooth stone from the beach, placed it next to Elaine's rose garden. Something about the way it fit in my hand reminded me of her. Solid, comforting, unassuming. Spring came slowly that year. It crept in with pale mornings and shy blossoms, and I welcomed it like a letter long overdue. Naomi's tulips bloomed in neat rows. The robins returned, and with them a certain ease settled back into everything. Andrew came by more often. He didn't ask for forgiveness again, he just showed up. Fixed a loose shutter one day, replaced a broken step the next. We didn't talk about the past much. We didn't need to. Sometimes silence is enough when it's honest. One evening, we sat by the fire pit. Naomi joined us with mugs of cider. Elena arrived just before sunset and pulled her chair close to mine. The sky turned orange, then deep purple. The fire crackled. Max snored at our feet. And for a brief, perfect moment, we were just a family again. Not perfect, not the same as before, but something new, something whole in its own weathered way. I thought about all the things I'd nearly lost, my dignity, my history, my voice. And how, somehow, in the middle of all that loss, I'd found something I never expected, myself. The guest house was never meant to be more than a solution, a temporary fix. But it had become home in the truest sense, not because of its size or finishings, because I had filled it with meaning, with stories, with breath. And when the wind moved through the trees just right, I could swear I heard Elaine laughing, soft and clear. I smiled into the fire, heart steady, knowing I'd carried her with me through the storm. And I'd arrived whole. There was a rhythm to the days now, and I followed it not out of obligation, but because I liked how it felt. I liked knowing that the sun would hit the porch around 9:30, warming the wood beneath my feet. That the kettle would whistle just after I finished feeding Max. That Naomi would appear like clockwork around noon, usually with a bag of groceries or a story about something absurd she'd overheard in town. I started writing more, not just journaling but real writing. I dug out an old typewriter from the attic of the main house. Naomi had kept it, tucked in a corner, untouched since the 80s. I oiled the keys, replaced the ribbon, and pulled a stack of blank paper from the bottom drawer of my nightstand. It made a sound I'd forgotten, soft, deliberate clacks, like a heartbeat for ideas. The first thing I wrote was a letter to Elaine. Not because I believed she could read it, but because I needed to say everything I hadn't. I told her about the house, about the betrayal, about how I nearly let it all disappear because I was too polite to fight. I told her about Naomi, about Elena, about the fire I thought I'd lost, and how it came roaring back when I realized no one else could protect what we built but me. I ended the letter with the same line I used to whisper to her before bed. Asterisk still yours always, asterisk. I folded it carefully and placed it in a small wooden box, along with a pressed rose from her garden and a photo of us from our trip to the mountains. That box now sits on a shelf near my reading chair. I look at it sometimes when the days are quiet. On Sunday mornings, Elena and I started a new tradition, breakfast at the diner down the road. She always ordered pancakes with strawberries. I stuck with eggs and black coffee. We didn't talk the whole time. Sometimes we just looked around, eavesdropped on the conversations around us, shared glances when something strange or sweet caught our ears. She reminded me of myself when I was young, observant, quiet until she had something worth saying. One morning she brought a boy with her. His name was Malcolm. Nervous, polite, hair a little too long in the front. He shook my hand firmly, looked me in the eye. I liked that. Elena beamed the whole time, and I could tell she wanted me to approve, not because she needed permission, but because she cared what I thought. After they dropped me off, she lingered on the porch. "Did you like him?" "He's all right," I said, "but I liked you more." She laughed and hugged me tight. I watched them drive off, and for a moment I was struck by how much life I'd been gifted, how many new firsts were waiting, even in the last chapters. Naomi's garden flourished that summer. Bright bursts of red, yellow, and violet sprouted from the ground like they'd always belonged there. She let me help sometimes, though I mostly handed her tools and scolded Max for digging holes. She whistled while she worked, always off-key, always cheerful. We hosted a few small dinners, nothing fancy. Just neighbors, old friends, sometimes someone Naomi met at the market. I liked setting the table, choosing the music, lighting the candles. It gave the evening shape, made it feel intentional. One night after everyone left and we were stacking dishes, Naomi looked at me and said, "You know you could have given up. A lot of people would have, but you didn't." I thought about that. I did for a while, I said. But then I remembered whose house this was, whose life it still is. She nodded, understanding more than words could say. That night I stood by the window long after the lights were out, watching the moonlight spill across the lake. I felt no bitterness, no lingering anger, only stillness, a kind I hadn't known in years. And beneath it all, something better than peace. Pride. One afternoon in late September, I received a postcard. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting instantly, delicate, curved, overly neat. It was Carla's. Just a few words on the back of a photograph of a lighthouse. Asterisk, we're fine, hope you're well. I was wrong about a lot of things. Asterisk. Carla. I sat with it for a while. Didn't feel anger. Didn't feel joy either. Just an odd ache, the kind you get when an old bruise itches. I didn't write back. Some chapters don't need sequels, just endings that aren't ugly. Instead, I tucked the card behind a picture of Elaine and me at the beach. She's holding her hat down against the wind, laughing like I just told the best joke on earth. The photo's been with me for 40 years. Now Carla's card lives behind it. Two truths layered, one painful, one eternal. October arrived with that crisp air that makes you crave coffee at dusk. Naomi and I started a new tradition, evening tea on her porch, just after the sun dipped. We'd sit in the quiet, wrapped in sweaters, passing a thermos between us, trading stories like old coins. She told me about her husband, a sculptor, long gone now. She said he had hands that could shape anything except his own fate. Cancer took him fast. She said the house felt too quiet for years until I moved into the guest house and brought life back in. That meant something to me. I told her about the year Elaine, and I painted the hallway 3 different colors before settling on one. About how she danced while cleaning, always barefoot, humming old Sinatra tunes. Sometimes we didn't say anything, just stared into the half-dark, listening to the crickets. That silence wasn't empty either. It felt like home. The day it snowed early, Naomi left a scarf on my porch, knitted navy blue, still warm from her hands. I wore it for the next 3 days straight. Didn't mention it. Neither did she. But the next week, I brought her a book I knew she'd love, a first edition of a poetry collection her husband used to read aloud. We were exchanging small kindnesses like letters, written in objects, gestures, and time. Elena came home for winter break. She hugged me tighter than usual. She stayed in the guest house for 2 nights, on the pull-out sofa, wrapped in the thick quilt I kept just for her. We stayed up late, playing cards and watching old movies on my dusty DVD player. At one point, she looked over and said, "I didn't think you'd come back from all that, Grandpa." I knew what she meant. I didn't either, I said. But then I remembered who I was before they made me feel small. The snow got deeper. I got slower, but I didn't feel weak. I felt weathered like the trees that had stood for decades outside the guest house windows, bent, scarred, still upright. On Christmas morning, Naomi made a full breakfast and invited me over. We exchanged small gifts. I gave her a wind chime with birds carved in wood. She gave me a record of Ella Fitzgerald, one I'd mentioned months ago in passing. It was like being seen. Andrew sent me a text, "Merry Christmas, Dad, thinking of you, asterisk." I replied, "You too, son, asterisk." It was enough. That night I sat by the fire alone, Ella's voice playing low in the background. I looked around the guest house, the framed sketch from Elena, the pressed rose in the wooden box, the coat Naomi had hung on the hook without asking. There was no noise, no rush, no one needing me to shrink to make space for them. Just my breath, the warmth, and the long, quiet rhythm of a life finally lived on my terms. The days rolled into a gentle winter blur. Snow thickened on the trees, softened every corner of the world. The lake froze over, smooth as glass, and the sound of boots crunching through the fresh powder became the soundtrack to my mornings. I started walking again, slowly, always bundled in Naomi's scarf, with Max leading the way like a small, furry general. Elena returned to school, promising to visit in the spring. She left behind a small notebook filled with her sketches, portraits of me, Naomi, the house, the guest house. She even drew Max, curled up like a croissant near the fireplace. I kept the notebook by my bedside. Some nights I flipped through it instead of reading. It reminded me that people see more in you than you think, especially the ones who pay attention. Naomi caught a cold in February and insisted it was nothing. But I could tell it wore her out more than she let on. I brought soup, sat with her in silence. She didn't like being fussed over, but she let me sit beside her while she dozed. At one point she opened her eyes and whispered, "Don't go making this a habit. I'm not fragile." I nodded, "Neither am I." It snowed heavy that week and everything slowed. No one came by, no mail, no deliveries. The world shrank into something manageable, intimate. I read old letters. I listened to quiet music. I watched the fire until it burned low, then lit it again. Time moved gently now, and I didn't mind its pace. On the first sunny day of March, Andrew showed up unannounced. No warning, just a knock and the sight of his familiar face through the glass. I opened the door slowly, unsure of what version of him I'd get. But he wasn't angry, he looked tired, humbled. He had a coat on, too light for the weather, and a Tupperware of lasagna in his hands. "I made this," he said. "You cook now?" "I try." I let him in. We sat. He didn't push conversation, just looked around the place, nodded to himself. "It's nice here," he said after a while. "It's home," I said. He smiled faintly. Yeah, it is." We ate in near silence, the clink of forks and the hum of the old heater filling the space. He didn't ask for anything, didn't apologize again, and that strangely made the visit feel more real, more human. When he left, he hesitated at the door. "I was a fool," he said finally. "You didn't deserve what we did. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want to be your son again." I looked at him for a long time, saw the boy in his eyes, not the man who tried to control me. "You never stopped being my son," I said, "but you forgot how to be my family." He nodded slowly. "I'm trying to remember." After he left, I didn't cry. I didn't sigh. I just sat back in my chair, placed the empty dish in the sink, and let the silence wrap around me like a warm blanket. Somewhere outside, Max barked at a squirrel. The lake cracked softly in the thaw. A bird, maybe the first of the season, tapped at the edge of the window. And I thought to myself, this is what healing feels like. Not dramatic, not loud. Just steady, earned quiet. The thaw came slowly, but it came. The snow retreated day by day, revealing the bones of the world beneath it, damp soil, brittle twigs, the first sharp green shoots of Naomi's tulips pushing up through the earth. The lake melted unevenly, the surface cracked like old glass, and for days the whole shoreline seemed to breathe again. I stood outside often, just watching the light return to things. Naomi recovered fast, stubborn as always. By the time the frost was gone from the ground, she was back in the garden, kneeling in her patched jeans, humming her off-key tunes. I joined her, even if I couldn't bend the way I used to. I handed her gloves, trimmed the branches she couldn't reach, brought her lemonade like she was royalty. She called me her retired butler, and I didn't mind it one bit. Elena came home for a weekend in April. She brought Malcolm again. His hair was shorter this time, and he was more relaxed, less apologetic about standing next to her like he belonged there. I liked him better now. He asked questions, real ones. He listened. That meant more to me than anything he could have said. We ate dinner out on the lawn, a simple picnic of sandwiches and cookies. The sun dipped low while we talked about books and movies and the little absurdities of modern life. At one point, Elena leaned her head against Malcolm's shoulder and said, "This is my favorite place." She meant the yard, The guest house, us. That night after they'd gone, I sat out by the rose garden. The air smelled of earth and new life. I ran my fingers along the stone I'd placed beside Elaine's bench, the smooth beach stone from that trip Naomi helped me take. It had been sitting there all winter, collecting frost, surviving. I closed my eyes and let myself imagine Elaine sitting next to me, her knees close to mine, both of us in our old sweaters. She'd rest her head on my shoulder and we wouldn't say anything. We'd just be. Together in the place we built. In the silence that wasn't silence, just comfort. I whispered a thank you. To her. To Naomi. To Elena. To myself. The next morning, Naomi knocked on my door with a newspaper folded under her arm. "You're famous," she said, handing it over. Front page of the local section. Elderly man reclaims his life and his home. Mason had told the story to a columnist as part of a feature on aging and housing rights. They used a photo of me standing in front of the guest house, hands in pockets, hat tilted slightly back. I looked calm, proud. The article didn't name Andrew or Carla. It didn't mention the uglier details. It focused on resilience, on standing your ground, on what it means to be seen. I read it once, slowly, then folded it neatly and slid it between the pages of my journal. Not because I needed to remember, but because someone else might someday. Later that week, I walked into town and donated a box of old tools to the community center. They were the same tools Andrew once told me to get rid of because we'll just hire someone if we need anything fixed. Now, they'd go to hands that still wanted to build. On the walk back, I passed a little boy playing in his front yard with a toy hammer. His mother stood nearby, smiling. As I passed, the boy looked up and said, "Hey, you look like a builder." I stopped, grinned, tipped my hat. Used to be, still got it in me though. The boy nodded seriously. "You look like someone who doesn't let people mess with your house." I laughed the rest of the way home.